The emergency meeting at Whitfield Energy Solutions was supposed to be routine final preparations for their global product launch.
The delays are unacceptable. We need
Instead,
results now.
chaos
We're working on
erupted
it. The
when
permits are
central
holding us up.
generator died,
Fix it.
plunging
You
everything
approved this
into
without my
darkness.
authorization.
Senior
I had to act
engineers
quickly. There was no
panicked as the
time.
clock
This is a
ticked
disaster.
toward
You're fired.
No one dared promise a fix in time for the demonstration that would make or break the company's future. Jack Morrison, a maintenance worker, stood quietly in the corner, observing the panic with the steady gaze of a man who had faced far worse than a broken generator. Victoria Whitfield, 34, beautiful, powerful, and notoriously demanding, commanded the room with an icy precision that had earned her the media nickname, the Ice Queen of Clean Energy. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her designer suit impeccable, her expression unreadable as she assessed the situation. She had graduated from Harvard Business School at 25, taken over 3 failing energy startups by 30, and transformed her father's company into a renewable powerhouse worth $11 billion. But beneath the polished exterior lay wounds that had never healed. Her mother had taken her own life when Victoria was 16, unable to bear Richard Whitfield's endless affairs and cold indifference. Victoria had found her mother's body in the bathtub of their Manhattan penthouse, pills scattered across Italian marble. A note that simply read, "Love is weakness." From that day forward, Victoria had built her life around a simple principle: never let anyone close enough to hurt you. Romance was a transaction. Marriage was a business merger. And people like maintenance workers existed in a different universe, one that barely registered in her consciousness. Jack Morrison's universe revolved around a 7-year-old girl named Lily. At 36, he possessed the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from actual work rather than gym memberships. Broad shoulders from lifting calloused hands, from fixing crow's feet, from squinting at circuit boards under harsh fluorescent lights. He had once been Lieutenant Colonel Jack Morrison, head of engineering for the Army Corps, designing power grids for forward operating bases in Afghanistan. He had had a promising career, a beautiful wife named Sarah, and plans for a big family. Then Sarah had left him a note shorter than Catherine Whitfield's, "I can't do this." She had walked out when Lily was 6 months old, leaving Jack with a baby, a broken heart, and a choice. He had chosen Lily. The military career ended. The 6-figure salary disappeared. He took contract maintenance jobs that let him pick up Lily from school, help with homework, tuck her in every night. His world had shrunk from international deployments to a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, from commanding hundreds to answering to supervisors half his age who couldn't tell a capacitor from a resistor. But when Lily looked at him with those green eyes, Sarah's eyes, and called him the best daddy in the world, he knew he had made the right choice. Every sacrifice was worth her smile, every missed opportunity justified by her laughter. She was brilliant, his Lily, obsessed with robots and circuits, always asking how broken things could be fixed. Just like people, she had once said with startling wisdom, "Sometimes people break too, but that doesn't mean they can't work again." Jack had hugged her tight that day, wondering how a 7-year-old understood what adults often forgot. Their first encounter had happened 3 weeks before the generator crisis, though neither would have called it memorable. Jack had been called to the executive floor to fix an electrical short that had knocked out half the overhead lighting. The in-house electrical team had spent 2 hours examining blueprints, arguing about building codes, calling manufacturers. Jack had arrived with a toolbox and 20 years of experience. He had found the problem in 10 minutes. A corroded ground wire hidden behind a marble panel. While the senior engineers debated solutions, Jack had quietly fixed it. The lights had come back on just as Victoria Whitfield had stepped out of the elevator, her heels clicking against marble floors like a countdown to execution. She had been on her phone negotiating a merger worth hundreds of millions when she had noticed mud on the marble tracked in from the parking lot where Jack had walked through a puddle to reach the service entrance. Her voice had cut through his concentration like a blade. "You maintenance, my Tesla has mud splashed on the driver's side. Take care of it." She hadn't looked at his face, hadn't seen the way his jaw tightened at being addressed like furniture. Jack had set down his tools slowly, deliberately. He had turned to face her, and for just a moment their eyes had met. She had expected defiance, maybe anger. Instead, she had found something else, a quiet dignity that made her uncomfortable. "I'll clean it with the cleanest hands available," he had said, his voice carrying an odd emphasis on the word cleanest. She had already dismissed him from her mind, returning to her call as she walked away. Later, reviewing security footage while investigating a separate issue, she had seen him in the parking garage. He had spent 15 minutes meticulously cleaning her car, not with the quick spray and wipe job she had expected, but with the careful attention of someone who understood that how you do small things reflects how you do everything. She had also seen him afterward sharing his lunch with a homeless veteran who lived near the garage entrance, sitting with the man for 20 minutes, listening to stories about Vietnam. She told herself it didn't matter. People were either useful or they weren't. Jack Morrison was maintenance, useful for fixing things, nothing more. Yet something about his deliberate care, his quiet kindness when he thought no one was watching, had lodged in her mind like a splinter she couldn't quite remove. The morning of the product launch had started like a military operation. 200 journalists from 30 countries were gathered in the main auditorium. The demonstration required perfect timing, a synchronized display of Whitfield Energy's new solar panel grid that could power an entire city block from a surface area the size of a basketball court. The investors alone represented $60 billion in potential contracts. The Department of Energy had sent a delegation. 3 senators were in attendance. Everything depended on the massive generator that powered not just the building's regular operations, but the entire demonstration grid. At 11:30 in the middle of the final technical review, that generator had died. The failure was catastrophic and inexplicable. The generator was only 2 years old, Swedish engineered with triple redundancy systems. The senior engineering team, 15 men and women with advanced degrees from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech, huddled around diagnostic tablets, their voices growing increasingly panicked. "Minimum 6 hours to diagnose," the chief engineer announced. "Another 3 to implement repairs, maybe 4. Victoria stood at the head of the conference table, her knuckles white as she gripped its edge. 9 hours meant the launch would fail. The journalists would leave. The investors would withdraw. The senators would remember this embarrassment when Whitfield Energy sought federal contracts. Her father would call it proof that women couldn't handle real pressure. Jack had been in the building's mechanical room fixing an HVAC unit when a supervisor called him to the boardroom. They needed all hands, even maintenance, to at least look like they were doing something. He stood in the corner, tool belt around his waist, studying the chaos with the same quiet attention he had once used to assess damaged infrastructure in Kandahar. Unlike the engineers focused on their tablets, he walked to the window and looked out at the generator housing. He noticed something they hadn't, a pattern in the exhaust venting that suggested the problem wasn't electrical, but mechanical. A specific type of mechanical failure he had seen before in the field when sand had clogged similar systems. "It's the pressure relief valve," he said, not loudly, but with enough certainty that the room quieted. The chief engineer laughed. Actually laughed. "The relief valve. That's your expert diagnosis. You're a maintenance worker, not an engineer." Jack shrugged. "I've seen this exact failure pattern before in Afghanistan. Different generator, same Swedish manufacturer. The valve fails, creates a cascade shutdown. Looks electrical, but it's not. I can fix it." The laughter spread through the engineering team. One of them, a young MIT graduate named Preston Miller, was particularly vocal. "You're suggesting that our entire engineering team missed something a janitor spotted? That's absurd." Victoria watched this exchange with growing frustration. The clock on the wall showed 12:45. In 75 minutes, she would either triumph or face the kind of public humiliation that ended careers. She studied Jack's face, the calm certainty, the lack of ego, the way he didn't flinch under the ridicule. Her father had taught her to read people like financial statements. Jack Morrison wasn't lying or grandstanding. He believed he could fix it. "How long?" she asked, cutting through the laughter. 90 minutes, Jack replied. "Maybe less if I can access the right parts." The engineering team erupted in protests. Victoria raised one hand, silencing them. Then she walked across the room until she stood directly in front of Jack, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and cold like winter roses. "Let me make this interesting," she said, her voice carrying the kind of dangerous sweetness that preceded hostile takeovers. "You claim you can fix what my entire engineering team cannot. Fine. If you succeed, if that generator is running before 2 o'clock, I'll kiss you right here in front of everyone." She paused, letting the absurdity of the offer sink in. A CEO kissing a maintenance worker. The scandal would be delicious. "But when you fail," she continued, "you're fired. No severance, no reference, nothing. Do we have a deal?" The room went silent. Everyone waited for Jack to back down, to admit he had overstepped, to apologize and retreat. Instead, he looked at her with those steady brown eyes and said something that would replay in her mind for months afterward. "I don't need your kiss, Miss Whitfield, but my daughter has a robotics demonstration tonight at her school. She needs the lights to work. I'll fix your generator because it's the right thing to do. That's the only deal I need." Jack walked out of the boardroom without waiting for permission, heading straight for the generator housing. He shed his outer work shirt, revealing a white t-shirt underneath that stretched across shoulders built by actual labor. His movements were economical, purposeful, a man who had learned efficiency in places where wasted motion could be fatal. Inside the generator housing, the problem was worse than he had anticipated. The pressure relief valve hadn't just failed. It had triggered a cascade of secondary failures throughout the system. The diagnostic panels showed error codes the manual didn't even recognize. But Jack had seen worse. He had once restored power to a field hospital using salvaged parts from 3 different generators while under mortar fire. He started by bypassing the main control system entirely, a move that would have horrified the engineers watching through the security cameras. Using tools from his personal kit tools he had carried through 3 combat zones, he began rewiring the auxiliary circuits to create a temporary bypass. His hands moved with the muscle memory of 20 years stripping wires with practiced precision, creating connections that existed in no manual but worked in the field. Sweat began to soak through his shirt as the temperature in the housing climbed. The generator was fighting him, every safety system trying to prevent exactly what he was doing. But safety systems were designed by people who never had to choose between perfect and functional when lives were on the line. In his mind, he wasn't in a corporate generator housing. He was back in Kandahar, middle of summer, 120 degrees, trying to restore power to a medical facility full of wounded civilians. Except this time, the life on the line was smaller, more personal. Lily had been working on her robot for 3 months. She had named it Helper, because, as she had explained with 7-year-old seriousness, robots should help people, Daddy, not hurt them. She had programmed it herself, using the coding books Jack had bought with money saved from skipping lunches. Tonight was her first demonstration, and she had made him promise to be there by 6 o'clock to sit in the front row where she could see him, to watch her prove that a motherless kid from Queens could be just as smart as anyone else. The engineering team gathered in the security office, watching Jack work through multiple camera angles. Their mockery gradually faded to confusion, then to grudging interest. "He's creating a parallel circuit using the emergency backup capacitors," one observed. "That's actually brilliant. Completely against protocol, but brilliant." Preston, the MIT graduate, was furiously checking his tablet. "Those connections he's making, they're not random. He's essentially building a temporary generator within the generator. How does a maintenance worker know how to do that?" The chief engineer remained silent, watching Jack's hands move with a kind of precision that couldn't be taught, only earned. At 1:53, Jack made the final connection. For a moment, nothing happened. The generator remained silent. Dead, a $12 million piece of scrap metal. Then, deep within its core, something stirred. A low vibration almost below hearing, like the first heartbeat of something massive coming back to life. Jack placed one hand on the housing, feeling the rhythm, making minute adjustments to his improvised circuits. The vibration grew stronger, steadier. At 1:57, the generator roared back to life, not with the smooth purr of normal operation, but with the determined growl of a machine forced back from the dead through sheer will. Lights flooded back throughout the building. Computer screens blinked awake. The demonstration grid in the auditorium hummed with power. In the boardroom, the engineering team stood in stunned silence. Someone started clapping slowly at first, then others joined until the entire room echoed with applause. Except for Victoria. She stood frozen at the window watching Jack emerge from the generator housing. His white t-shirt was now soaked with sweat and stained with grease. His hands were black with oil. He looked exhausted, depleted like a soldier after a battle. But he didn't look up at the boardroom window, didn't look for her approval or acknowledgement. He simply pulled out his phone, checked the time, and started walking toward the service exit. "Who is he?" Victoria asked quietly. Her assistant quickly pulled up Jack's file. Jack Morrison, contract maintenance worker, started 3 months ago. Previously, oh, the assistant paused. Previously, Lieutenant Colonel Army Corps of Engineers, numerous commendations including a Bronze Star, resigned his commission 4 years ago for personal reasons. Victoria read between the lines. Personal reasons in military files usually meant family. She watched Jack disappear into the stairwell, presumably heading to clean up and clock out. An hour ago she had seen him as barely human, just another replaceable part in the corporate machine. Now something had shifted, creating an uncomfortable dissonance she couldn't name. The product launch proceeded flawlessly, but Victoria found herself distracted, her eyes constantly drifting to the service entrances, looking for someone who had already left. She found Jack in the parking garage, loading his tools into a battered Ford pickup that looked older than some of the interns. He had changed into clean-clothes jeans and a flannel shirt that made him look like every working-class stereotype she had been taught to look down upon. But there was something in the way he moved, careful and deliberate, that spoke of dignity earned rather than inherited. "You left," she said, approaching him with the click of heels that usually announced her authority. "The launch isn't over." He continued loading his tools without looking at her. "My part was done, generators fixed. My shift ended at 2 o'clock. The dismissal stung more than it should have. People didn't walk away from Victoria Whitfield. They waited for her to dismiss them. About what I said earlier, she started the words awkward in her mouth. The promise I made." Now he looked at her, and she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not desire or expectation, but a kind of weary amusement. "You mean the kiss? That was for your engineers, wasn't it? To make them feel small, to remind them that even their failures were worth more than my success?" The accuracy of his assessment left her momentarily speechless. He continued, his voice calm but firm. "I've met people like you before, Miss Whitfield. People who think everyone else exists just to reflect their importance. But here's something you might not understand. I don't need your validation. I don't need your kiss. I fixed your generator because it was broken and I knew how to fix it. That's all." He started to get into his truck, but something, pride, curiosity, or perhaps the unfamiliar sting of being dismissed, made her grab his arm. The muscle beneath the flannel was solid, real, in a way that nothing in her corporate world ever was. "Wait," she said, hating the uncertainty in her voice. "You were right about the valve, about the solution, about why I made that offer. But you still surprise me. In my world, nobody turns down an advantage, even a ridiculous one." He looked at where her manicured hand rested on his working-class arm, the contrast sharp as a metaphor. "In my world, advantages aren't given by people like you. They're earned by showing up every day, doing the work, going home to the people who actually matter." The words should have angered her. Instead, she felt something else, a pull, like gravity shifted. Before she could stop herself, she raised up on her toes and pressed her lips to his cheek. Not the theatrical kiss she had promised, not the power move she had threatened, but something smaller and more honest. His skin was rough with stubble, warm, real. He smelled like honest work and Old Spice, nothing like the calculated cologne of the executives she occasionally dated for appearance's sake. "Thank you," she whispered, the words foreign on her tongue, "for saving the launch." He pulled back, studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. "I didn't do it for you or your launch. I did it for Lily, my daughter. She needs to know that when things break, we fix them. We don't give up. We don't make excuses. We fix them." As he drove away, leaving her standing alone in the parking garage, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced since finding her mother's body. The vertigo of realizing the world was larger and more complex than the narrow corridor of power she had inhabited. 3 days passed before she saw him again. He was in the lobby fixing an elevator panel when she returned from a board meeting. Their eyes met across the marble expanse, and she expected what acknowledgement interest. Instead, he simply nodded, the way one professional acknowledges another, and returned to his work. The dismissal burned. She started noticing him more after that. The way he ate lunch alone but never looked lonely. The way younger maintenance workers came to him with problems, and he'd teach rather than just fix. The way he kept a photo of Lily in his wallet worn from constant handling. She overheard him once on the phone with Lily's school patiently explaining that he couldn't attend a midday parent conference because he couldn't afford to lose the hours. But could they possibly schedule something before 7 o'clock in the morning? A week after the generator incident, she made a decision that surprised even herself. The company was hosting its annual charity gala. $5,000 a plate black tie, the kind of event where money pretended to care about causes. She had her assistant deliver an invitation to Jack personally. The invitation came back the next day, politely declined with a note. "Thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, I have a prior commitment. My daughter and I have a standing Friday night date pizza and a movie. I'm sure you understand." She didn't understand. People killed for invitations to this gala. CEOs of major corporations had called in favors to attend. But for Jack, Morrison pizza with a 7-year-old mattered more. That Friday night she found herself driving through Queens past Jack's apartment building. She saw them through a pizzeria window. Jack and Lily sharing a pepperoni pizza. The little girl gesticulating wildly about something while Jack listened with complete attention. He laughed at something she said, and the transformation was remarkable. The weariness lifted the weight of single parenthood momentarily forgotten. He looked young, happy, free. The next Monday, Victoria went to the maintenance office during Jack's lunch break. He was sitting alone at a metal table eating a sandwich that looked homemade, reading what appeared to be a technical manual. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. The other maintenance workers froze, watching their CEO in a designer suit worth more than their monthly salaries standing in their break room. Jack looked up surprised but not intimidated. "It's a free country," he said, which wasn't exactly an invitation but wasn't a rejection either. She sat down her designer bag, looking absurd on the scratched metal table. "I wanted to apologize." She said words that had literally never passed her lips in a professional context. For the kiss comment. It was demeaning. "You deserve better." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Apology accepted. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was full of unspoken questions. Finally, she asked the one that had been bothering her most. "Why didn't you come to the gala? It could have been good for your career." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Whitfield, I've had a career. I've had success, recognition, all of it. None of it meant anything when my daughter woke up crying for a mother who wasn't coming back. The only career I care about now is being Lily's dad." The honesty was brutal in its simplicity. She found herself telling him about her mother, words spilling out that she had never shared with anyone except therapists bound by confidentiality, about finding the body, about the note, about spending 18 years proving that love was indeed weakness. Jack listened without judgment, without the fake sympathy she had encountered from others who had learned her story. When she finished, he said simply, "That must have been hell. But you're wrong about one thing. Love isn't weakness. Love is the only thing that makes us strong enough to survive the worst life throws at us." That conversation changed something between them. Not friendship exactly, not romance, but a recognition of shared damage and different responses to it. She started finding excuses to be in parts of the building where he worked. He started looking less surprised when she appeared. They talked about Lily's school projects, about energy policy, about everything except the growing tension between them. Jessica Lane, Victoria's CFO and oldest friend from Harvard, was the first to notice. "You're different lately," she said over drinks, "less glacial." "Is there someone new?" Victoria denied it automatically, but Jessica wasn't fooled. Victoria, "I've known you since we were undergrads. You've scheduled bathroom breaks for the last decade. Now you're suddenly taking unplanned walks through maintenance areas. Either you've developed an interest in HVAC systems, or there's a man." He's a maintenance worker, Victoria finally admitted. A former Army lieutenant colonel with a Bronze Star. He has a 7-year-old daughter who builds robots. Jessica's eyebrows rose. And Richard doesn't know. My father would have an aneurysm. Which means this is serious, Jessica said thoughtfully. You've never cared what Richard thought about the men you dated before. I'm not dating him, Victoria protested. We just talk. Jessica's knowing smile said everything words couldn't. The crisis came 3 weeks later. Richard Whitfield made one of his rare appearances at the office, ostensibly to review quarterly reports, but really to remind everyone who truly owned the company. He noticed Victoria in the lobby talking to Jack about Lily's upcoming science fair project. The conversation was innocent, professional even, but Richard saw something in his daughter's face that triggered every alarm in his controlling mind. He waited until Jack left, then pulled Victoria into his office. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice carrying the quiet menace that had intimidated boardrooms for 40 years. "That maintenance worker. I've seen how you look at him." Victoria straightened, the childhood instinct to obey warring with adult indignation. "I don't know what you're implying, but Jack Morrison is an employee, nothing more." Richard laughed, cold and knowing. "Don't insult my intelligence. I've seen that look before. Your mother had it once before she learned what the world was really like. That man is beneath you, Victoria, literally and figuratively. End it now, whatever it is, before you embarrass yourself in this company." The worst part was that he was right about the look. She did look at Jack differently. She looked for him in crowds. She thought about him at night in her empty penthouse. She wondered what it would be like to be loved by someone who'd choose pizza with his daughter over networking with billionaires. But Richard Whitfield's daughter didn't get to want those things. There's nothing to end. Jack Morrison is maintenance. I'm CEO. We exist in different worlds, but worlds have a way of colliding. The next evening, Victoria stayed late trying to lose herself in spreadsheets and projections. The building was nearly empty when she heard a child crying. She followed the sound to the maintenance office, where she found Lily curled up on the break room couch, tears streaming down her face. Jack was kneeling beside her, his face etched with worry. "Hey, Victoria," said softly, not wanting to intrude but unable to walk away. "What's wrong?" Jack looked up, exhaustion and worry making him look older. "Lily's sick. Fever came on suddenly. I couldn't leave work. I've already used all my sick days for her school events. I had to bring her here." Victoria looked at the little girl flushed with fever, clutching a stuffed robot to her chest. Without thinking, she knelt beside Jack, placing a hand on Lily's forehead. The child opened green eyes, so like the mother who had abandoned her, and whispered, "Are you the pretty lady Daddy talks about?" Jack flushed, mumbling something about kids saying silly things. But Victoria felt something crack in her chest. She made a decision that would have appalled Richard. "Come on," she said, helping Lily sit up. "My car has better air conditioning. Let's get you home." The ride to Queens was surreal. Victoria Whitfield, CEO, driving through working-class neighborhoods in her Tesla, a sick child in the back seat, a maintenance worker beside her giving directions. Lily fell asleep halfway there, her fever breaking, mumbling about robots and angels. Jack carried her up 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, and Victoria followed, entering a world she had never imagined. The apartment was small but immaculate. Lily's drawings covered the refrigerator. A half-built robot sat on the kitchen table beside homework, carefully checked in Jack's handwriting. It was a home in a way her penthouse had never been. She stayed while Jack put Lily to bed, sitting on a couch that had seen better days, looking at photos on the wall. Jack in uniform, younger, prouder, unbroken. Jack and a beautiful woman on their wedding day, both glowing with hope that hadn't yet been betrayed. Jack holding baby Lily, his face transformed by a love so pure it hurt to witness. When he returned, she expected awkwardness. Instead, he made coffee instant, not the artisan blend she was used to, but somehow perfect in its simplicity. They talked until 3 in the morning about everything and nothing, about dreams deferred and loves lost, about the weight of being responsible for someone else's happiness. "Your father will destroy you if he finds out you were here," Jack said as dawn painted the Queen's sky gray. "He's already warned you about me, hasn't he?" She nodded, too tired to lie. "He says you're beneath me, that people like us don't mix with people like you." Jack smiled sadly. "He's right, you know. We don't belong in the same world. You're caviar and champagne. I'm pizza and beer. You're boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. I'm overtime and payment plans. Your world would eat me alive and mine would bore you to death." But he'd been wrong about that last part. Nothing about Jack Morrison bored her. The next morning she awoke on his couch to the smell of pancakes and the sound of a child's laughter. She found Jack and Lily in the kitchen making breakfast together with the easy choreography of a long-established routine. "Morning, Miss Whitfield." Lily chirped, fever-gone energy fully restored. "Daddy makes pancakes shaped like what you're learning in school. Today is the solar system. See?" She proudly held up a plate with misshapen planetary pancakes. "Victoria," she corrected gently. "You can call me Victoria." "Are you Daddy's girlfriend now?" Lily asked with the directness only children possess. Jack nearly dropped the spatula. "Lily, that's not—" "It's okay," Victoria interrupted. "I'm your dad's friend Lily. We work together." The little girl studied her with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "But you want to be his girlfriend. I can tell." Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks for the first time since high school. Jack quickly diverted the conversation, but the moment lingered between them, an unspoken question neither was ready to answer. Jessica called just as Victoria was helping clean up breakfast dishes, another first in a morning of firsts. "Where are you?" Jessica demanded. "You missed the 7 a.m. call with Tokyo. Richard is looking for you and he's not happy." Reality crashed back. Victoria made hasty goodbyes, promising Lily she'd see her science project soon. At the door she paused suddenly, uncertain. Jack stood too close and not close enough. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me stay. For the coffee and pancakes." "We're even," he replied. "You helped Lily. I fed you breakfast. No debts between us." But they both knew it wasn't that simple anymore. The next week passed in a blur of damage control. Victoria invented a plausible excuse for missing the Tokyo call, avoided her father, and found herself creating reasons to visit different parts of the building where maintenance might be working. Jack maintained a professional distance at work, but she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Jessica cornered her in her office on Friday. "Spill it. You've checked your phone 17 times in the last hour. You're wearing a color that isn't black, gray, or navy, and you smiled at the new intern instead of making him cry. This has gone beyond HVAC systems." Victoria hesitated, then pulled up Lily's school website on her computer. "Her science fair is tomorrow. She built a robot that can navigate obstacles and sort recycling." Jessica studied the screen, then Victoria's face. "You're in trouble, aren't you?" "I don't know what I'm doing, Jess. He's a maintenance worker with a 7-year-old. I'm running a company worth billions. This is insane. When was the last time you did something that wasn't perfectly calculated, something just because it made you happy?" Victoria couldn't remember. That realization terrified her more than her father's disapproval. Saturday morning found her parked outside Lily's elementary school, debating whether to go inside. Families streamed past her car, normal, happy families with matched sets of parents wearing weekend casual clothes instead of power suits. She didn't belong here. She should leave. Then she saw them. Jack in jeans and a worn leather jacket. Lily bouncing beside him, clutching a robot made from recycled parts and boundless imagination. Before she could change her mind, Victoria got out of the car. She had bought new clothes for the occasion, jeans and a sweater that had never seen the inside of a boardroom. Jack did a double-take when he spotted her, his surprise morphing into something warmer. "You came," he said simply. Lily squealed and launched herself at Victoria. "You're here. You can see Helper 2.0. Oh, he's way better than the first one. He doesn't just avoid obstacles. He helps clear them away just like people should. When something's in your way, you don't just go around it. Sometimes you need to move it so other people can get through too." The gymnasium buzzed with activity. Children explaining projects to judges, parents snapping photos, teachers, herding excited students. Victoria felt conspicuously out of place until Lily grabbed her hand and pulled her toward her display table. For the next hour, she was simply Victoria assistant to a brilliant 7-year-old, holding flashlights, fetching batteries, and fielding questions from curious onlookers, while Jack chatted with other parents. One mother squinted at Victoria suspiciously. "Are you Lily's mom? I don't think we've met at PTA." Before Victoria could answer, Lily piped up. "She's not my mom. My mom left when I was a baby. She's Daddy's special friend from work. She fixed my fever and knows about robots and business. She's teaching me how money works so I can sell my invention someday." The mother's eyebrows shot up. Victoria felt her professional mask slipping back into place, ready for judgment. But Jack appeared at her side, his hand settling lightly at the small of her back. "Victoria's been kind enough to take an interest in Lily's education. We're lucky to have her support." The warmth of his hand seeped through her sweater, anchoring her in a moment that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. The other mother nodded and moved on, but Victoria remained hyper-aware of Jack's touch, of the easy way he had included her in his life. When Lily won second place, her joy was incandescent. Jack lifted her onto his shoulders and Victoria snapped a photo with her phone, a moment of pure happiness she wanted to preserve. For just a moment, standing there watching them, Victoria saw what family could look like when it wasn't poisoned by power and betrayal. The reality check came in the form of Richard Whitfield waiting in her apartment when she returned Sunday evening. He had let himself in, of course he had a key. He owned the building. "Enjoying your weekend activities?" he asked, holding up photos taken by a private investigator. A science fair in Queens, really, Victoria. She wanted to rage, to fight, to defend herself. Instead, she felt tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying someone else's expectations for 34 years. "What are you so afraid of?" she asked. "That I'll be happy? That I'll choose something other than this cold, empty success you've built?" "I'm afraid," Richard said with devastating honesty, "that you'll end up like your mother, destroyed by believing someone beneath you could love you for yourself rather than your money." That maintenance worker doesn't see Victoria. He sees Whitfield energy, sees opportunity, sees a meal ticket for him and his daughter. The words hit their mark because they echoed her own fears. How could Jack Morrison love someone who had treated him like furniture, who'd offered to kiss him as an insult, who represented everything he'd walked away from? "You're right," she told her father, the words ash in her mouth. "It was a mistake. It won't happen again." But promises made in penthouses didn't hold in the real world. She tried to avoid Jack, but the building wasn't that big, and hearts weren't that obedient. He knew something had changed. The warmth in his eyes cooled to professional courtesy. The easy conversations ended. When Lily called the office one afternoon asking if Miss Victoria could come to her birthday party, Victoria gently redirected her, her voice carrying a finality that broke something in her chest. She threw herself into work, into deals and mergers, into the kind of success that looked good in Forbes, but felt empty at 3 a.m. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of seeing Jack from a distance, of noticing the deepening lines around his eyes, the way he'd lost weight, the way he no longer smiled, even when Lily called. She learned from overheard conversations that Lily had been asking about her, that Jack had run out of gentle explanations for why Victoria had disappeared. "You're making yourself miserable," Jessica observed. "And from what I hear from the maintenance department, he's not doing much better." "It's for the best," Victoria insisted. "Richard is right. We're from different worlds. Your father is afraid of one thing, that you'll discover happiness doesn't come from the Whitfield name or bank account. That terrifies him because it's exactly what your mother realized too late." Jessica's words stayed with her, an uncomfortable truth she couldn't shake. That night she found herself reviewing security footage, not for any security reason, but to catch glimpses of Jack. She watched him work, watched him interact with colleagues, watched the careful way he maintained his distance from her office, her floor, anywhere she might be. Then she saw it. Footage from that afternoon. Jack on the phone in the maintenance office, his face tight with worry. Lily had been sent home from school with a fever again. Jack's truck was in the shop. He was trying to find a coworker who could cover his shift so he could take a taxi home. Before she could second-guess herself, Victoria was in the elevator descending to the maintenance level. She found Jack in the break room gathering his things, his face drawn with worry. "Let me drive you," she said from the doorway. He looked up, surprise and weariness battling in his expression. "Victoria, we're fine. I called a taxi. Please, it's the least I can do." The ride to Queens was silent, charged with everything they weren't saying. At his building, Jack hesitated before getting out. "Would you like to come up? Lily's been asking about you." She should say no. She should maintain the distance that was best for everyone. Instead, she nodded and followed him upstairs. Lily was on the couch, wrapped in blankets, looking small and miserable. Her face lit up when she saw Victoria. "You came back. Daddy said you were too busy with important things, but I knew you'd come back someday." The simple faith in the child's voice undid her. Victoria sat beside Lily, smoothing back sweat-damp hair from her forehead. "I'm sorry I've been away. Work has been complicated." "Is it because Grandpa Whitfield doesn't like us?" Lily asked. "Daddy thinks I don't hear, but I do. He was talking to Uncle Mike about it. He said Grandpa Whitfield thinks we're not good enough." Jack, returning with a glass of water and children's Tylenol, froze in the doorway. "Lily, that's not—" "It's okay," Victoria interrupted. "My father is wrong, Lily. You and your dad are worth 100 of people like Richard Whitfield." The words once spoken couldn't be taken back, nor did she want to. They were true, more true than anything she'd said in the boardroom, in interviews, in the carefully controlled narrative of her life. After Lily fell asleep, Victoria helped Jack clean up the kitchen. The domesticity of it should have felt foreign, but instead it felt like coming home. They moved around each other with the ease of people who'd known each other much longer than a few weeks. "Why did you come back?" Jack finally asked, his voice low to avoid waking Lily. "After your father warned you away, after you decided we were a mistake." "I never said you were a mistake," Victoria countered. "I just got scared. My whole life I've been taught that people only want what I can give them. Money, power, connections. No one ever wanted just me." "I've never asked you for anything, Victoria. That's exactly it. You've never asked. You don't want anything from me. And that terrifies me because it means this, whatever this is between us, is real." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "And real is scary. Real is terrifying. Real means being vulnerable. Real means risking everything I've built." "Real also means this," he said and kissed her. Not the public spectacle she'd once mockingly offered, but something private and true. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, when she instead moved closer, her hands finding the solid warmth of his shoulders, the kiss deepened, became a conversation neither had been brave enough to start with words. When they finally broke apart, Victoria felt dizzy, untethered from the careful restraints of her life. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be with someone who doesn't fit into my world. Maybe it's not about fitting into each other's worlds. Maybe it's about building a new one together." The next few weeks unfolded in a careful dance of discovery. At work, they maintained professional distance, but evenings and weekends found Victoria in Queens more often than her penthouse. She learned the rhythm of Jack and Lily's life homework at the kitchen table, bath time negotiations, bedtime stories. She taught Lily about business and investments, setting up a small account for the child's future inventions. Jack showed her how to cook simple meals, how to fix a leaky faucet, how to live without an army of staff handling life's basic functions. They argued too about money and privilege, about Jack's stubborn pride, about Victoria's workaholic tendencies. When she offered to pay for Lily to attend a prestigious private school with an advanced science program, Jack refused. "We don't need your charity." "It's not charity," Victoria retorted. "It's an investment in a brilliant mind. Would you be this stubborn if a scholarship committee offered the same opportunity? That's different." "Why?" "Because it wouldn't hurt your pride to accept help from strangers. But it does from me." The argument ended with doors slammed and feelings bruised. Victoria retreated to her penthouse, convinced she'd been right. But as she moved through rooms filled with expensive, meaningless things, she realized something important. Jack's rejection wasn't about pride or stubbornness. It was about fear. Fear that Lily would grow attached to opportunities that could disappear if Victoria grew tired of playing house with the help. She returned to his apartment the next day with a proposal, not a scholarship, but a loan properly documented with reasonable terms to be repaid when Lily's inventions changed the world. Jack saw through the legal fiction, but he recognized the compromise for what it was, a bridge between their worlds. Jessica was the first to notice the change in Victoria. "You're humming," she accused over lunch. "You, Victoria Whitfield, Ice Queen of Clean Energy, are humming while reading quarterly reports." Victoria looked up, startled. "I don't hum." "You absolutely do. And you've been leaving the office before 7. And you didn't make the new VP cry during his presentation, even though his projections were clearly inflated." "Maybe I'm evolving as a leader. Maybe you're in love with the maintenance guy," Jessica countered. "And honestly, it looks good on you." Love. The word hung in the air between them, both thrilling and terrifying. Was that what this was? This constant awareness of Jack, this need to share every thought and experience with him, this growing attachment to his daughter, this feeling of being most herself when with them. Her phone chimed with a text from Jack. "Lily made pasta from scratch for dinner. Prepare for a flour apocalypse in the kitchen." "Still coming?" Victoria smiled, already looking forward to the chaos and warmth waiting in Queens. "I need to go. I have plans." "With the guy you're definitely not in love with?" Victoria gathered her things, surprising herself with her answer. "Yes, with the family I'm falling in love with." The pasta was indeed a flour-covered disaster, the sauce too garlicky, the table set with mismatched plates. It was the best meal Victoria had ever had. After Lily went to bed, she and Jack sat on the fire escape sharing a bottle of wine and watching the Queen's skyline. "I had a job offer today," Jack said quietly. "A private security firm. They need someone with my background to oversee infrastructure for client sites. Better hours, better pay." Victoria's heart stuttered. "Are you taking it?" "It's in Boston." 3 words that changed everything. Boston, hours away, a different life, a life without her. "I see." She managed her voice steady despite the sudden hollow feeling in her chest. "That's a great opportunity. I told them I needed time to think about it, to discuss it with the important people in my life. Lily would adapt. She's resilient. And Boston has excellent schools." Jack turned to face her fully. "I wasn't talking about just Lily." The implication hung between them, weightier than any corporate merger she'd ever negotiated. "Jack, I can't leave Whitfield Energy. It's my legacy, my responsibility. I'm not asking you to, but I need to know. What are we doing here, Victoria? Is this just a temporary adventure for you, slumming with the maintenance guy until you get bored? Or is this something real, something worth figuring out even if it's complicated?" The question demanded complete honesty, not just with Jack, but with herself. Victoria looked out at the Queen's skyline, then back at the man beside her. This man who'd fixed her broken generator and was somehow slowly fixing the broken places inside her too. "I've spent my entire adult life proving I'm not my mother, that I'm stronger, colder, more calculating, that I would never let love make me vulnerable. But the truth is, I think I was wrong about what made her weak. It wasn't loving my father. It was loving someone who couldn't love her back the same way." She took his hand, calloused and strong, so different from her manicured one. "This is real, Jack. The most real thing I've ever felt. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to make it work, how to bridge our worlds, how to be the person Lily needs, how to stand up to my father. But I want to try. I don't want you to go to Boston, unless I'm part of the plan." The vulnerability in her voice surprised them both. Jack reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. "I've been offered jobs all over the country since leaving the military, better jobs than Whitfield Energy. I stayed in New York for one reason, to give Lily stability, to be the parent who didn't leave." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "But now there's another reason to stay, a reason I never expected." When he kissed her this time, it felt like a promise, complicated, challenging, but real. As real as the city beneath them, as real as the stars above, as real as the family they were slowly, carefully building together. The decision to try making a relationship work despite their differences changed everything. Victoria began spending most evenings at Jack and Lily's apartment, creating a delicate balance between her corporate life and this new personal one. She'd arrive after Lily's bedtime on late work nights, sliding into Jack's embrace with the day's tension melting away. On better days, she joined them for dinner, helping Lily with homework or listening to Jack explain basic home repairs with the same passion she discussed quarterly projections. They kept their relationship private at work, professional distance maintained even as their personal lives intertwined. But rumors spread through the building like electricity through a circuit board. Security footage showed the CEO entering the maintenance supervisor's office too frequently for business purposes. A receptionist spotted them sharing lunch in a tucked-away corner of the company cafeteria. An intern swore he'd seen them holding hands in the parking garage after hours. Preston Miller, the MIT engineer who'd mocked Jack during the generator crisis, became the primary gossip conduit. Whitfield slumming it, he told anyone who'd listen, probably some midlife crisis thing. Or maybe she's researching how the other half lives for a PR campaign. Victoria ignored the whispers. She'd spent a lifetime being talked about as Richard Whitfield's daughter, as the youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 company, as the ice queen who never showed emotion. These rumors were no different, except they were because for the first time the gossip touched on something real, something precious she was still learning to protect. Jack felt the scrutiny more keenly. The maintenance team's dynamic shifted. Some treated him with newfound respect, others with suspicion. His supervisor started assigning him to the executive floor more frequently, with knowing winks that made Jack's jaw clench. He'd faced hostile territory in Afghanistan with less tension than he now felt walking through the Whitfield Energy lobby. "It would be easier if we went public," Victoria suggested one evening, curled against him on his worn couch. "We could control the narrative instead of letting gossip define us." Jack ran his fingers through her hair. Something she discovered melted her faster than any corporate negotiation. "And what would that narrative be? CEO dates employee film at 11. Your board would have concerns. Your father would have aneurysms. The press would have a field day. I don't care what they think." "Yes, you do. And you should. You've worked too hard to build your reputation. My reputation is the ice-cold CEO who sacrificed everything for the company. Maybe that needs reshaping anyway. I just don't want to be the reason you lose something important." "What if you're something more important?" She whispered the words, still new and frightening. Their careful compartmentalization cracked one Tuesday morning when Victoria's executive assistant buzzed her intercom. "Miss Whitfield, there's a Lily Morrison here to see you. She says it's an emergency." Victoria's heart dropped. She found Lily in the reception area, still wearing her school backpack, her small face flushed with exertion and determination. "Lily, what are you doing here? Does your dad know where you are?" The little girl shook her head. "School let out early for teacher meetings. Dad's working in the East Building today. I took the bus." She said this with immense pride. "I remembered the stop you showed me when we went shopping last weekend." Victoria ushered Lily into her office, mind racing. An 8-year-old had navigated New York public transportation alone to reach her. The thought terrified and touched her simultaneously. Why the emergency visit, she asked, already texting Jack that his daughter was safe with her. Lily pulled a crumpled paper from her backpack. "Career day is Friday. We're supposed to bring someone with an interesting job. I want you to come." "Me not your dad." "Dad came last year. Everyone already knows about the Army and fixing things." She gave Victoria the paper with the earnestness only children possess. "I want to show them you because you run everything and wear pretty suits and know how to make people listen, and because you're important to us." Victoria stared at the permission slip emotion catching in her throat. "Lily, I don't know if that's a good idea. People might think it's strange that I come instead of your dad." "Why?" "Because you're not my mom." Lily's directness was both refreshing and challenging. Sophia's uncle came last year because her parents were divorced and living in California. Jason's grandma came because his parents work on cruise ships. Why can't my dad's girlfriend come? Victoria's phone buzzed with Jack's reply. "Lily's where don't move. Coming now." He arrived 13 minutes later, barely containing his panic until he saw Lily safely ensconced in Victoria's office, happily using the CEO's tablet to design robot improvements while Victoria handled a conference call. "Lily Rose Morrison," he said. When Victoria finished her call, "You cannot leave school property alone. You cannot take buses across the city without an adult. You cannot show up at people's workplaces unannounced." But it's not people's workplaces. It's Victoria's building. And you always say Victoria is family now. The simple statement hung in the air between the adults. Jack looked at Victoria's apology and something deeper in his eyes. "We'll discuss this at home." Apologized to Victoria for interrupting her workday. "I'm sorry for interrupting," Lily said dutifully, "but I'm not sorry for coming. Will you please think about Career Day? It's Friday at 2 p.m. After they left, Victoria sat alone in her office, staring at the Career Day permission slip. Family now. The words echoed. Was that what they'd become? A family. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like a missing puzzle piece clicking into place. She cleared her Friday afternoon schedule. The classroom visit was a triumph. Lily beamed with pride as Victoria explained renewable energy in terms 8-year-olds could understand, showing solar panel miniatures and letting the children pass around a small working wind turbine. When a little boy asked if girls could really be bosses of big companies, Victoria's answer made Lily practically vibrate with joy. "Some of the best bosses I know are women, and some of the smartest future engineers I've met are in this room right now." The teacher pulled Victoria aside afterward. "Lily's been different these past few weeks. Happier, more confident. She talks about you constantly. She's an amazing child. I'm lucky to know her. It's been hard for her growing up without a mother. Jack has done an incredible job, but there are some things," the teacher hesitated. "Well, it's just nice to see Lily having a female role model who clearly cares about her." The conversation stayed with Victoria as she drove back to the office. She'd never imagined herself as anyone's role model, especially not a child's. Her own mother had been absent first emotionally, then permanently. She had no template for this role she was falling into, not quite a mother, more than just Dad's girlfriend, something new and undefined but increasingly essential. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Richard waiting in her office until she'd already walked in. Her father sat in her chair reviewing documents from her computer with the entitlement of someone who believed everything in the building ultimately belonged to him. "Interesting schedule change today. What was so important that you rescheduled the Tokyo investor's personal matter?" "The Tokyo call went fine this morning. Harrison handled it." "Personal matter," Richard repeated, finally looking up. "At an elementary school in Queens." The implied surveillance didn't surprise her. Richard had always monitored her movements, first as a protective father, later as a controlling one. What surprised her was her own lack of alarm. A month ago, she'd have been defensive, apologetic even. Now she just felt tired of the intrusion. "Yes. At Lily Morrison's school. I was her Career Day presenter." Richard's face hardened. "So it continues, this infatuation with the maintenance man and his child, despite our discussion." "It's not an infatuation. Jack and Lily are important to me. Important enough to risk your reputation, the company's reputation. Do you think the board would approve of you playing house with an employee?" Victoria's patience snapped. "The board doesn't get a vote in my personal life. Neither do you, for that matter." Richard rose, circling the desk to face her directly. "I built this company from nothing. Everything you have, this office, your position, your penthouse, your life exists because I made it possible." "No," Victoria said quietly. "I have this position because I earned it, because I graduated top of my class at Harvard, because I turned around 3 failing startups, because I increased company value by 40% in 4 years. The board confirmed me as CEO because I'm qualified, not because I'm your daughter." Richard laughed, the sound harsh and dismissive. "You think the board would have even considered you without my influence? You think they'd keep you if I suggested otherwise?" "Actually, yes." Victoria moved to her computer, pulling up a document she'd never had reason to examine closely before. According to the shareholder agreement you had me sign 3 years ago, I control 51% of voting shares. You transferred majority control to me after the Palmer acquisition." Richard froze, his expression shifting from dismissive to calculating. "That was a technical reorganization for tax purposes. The agreement stipulates that those shares revert to Whitfield family control if you act against company interests. And who determines company interests? The board, on which I hold the tie-breaking vote." Victoria leaned forward, confidence growing as she fully realized her position for the first time. "You gave me control, Dad. Maybe because you trusted me. Maybe because you needed the optics for the Japanese investors. Maybe because deep down you wanted me to have the power to stand up to you someday." The silence between them stretched, charged with decades of unspoken emotion. Richard Whitfield had always been larger than life in Victoria's eyes, the titan of industry, the demanding father, the man whose approval she'd spent a lifetime seeking. Now she saw something different, an aging man who'd lost the one person he truly loved and had spent decades ensuring he'd never feel that pain again, even if it meant controlling everyone around him. "Your mother would be disappointed." "No. Mom would recognize what's happening. She'd see that I found someone who values me for myself, not my name or my money. She'd be happy for me. She'd want you to be happy for me, too." Richard gathered his coat, his movements deliberate. "You think you know what love is? You think a few months with this man gives you insight into something lasting? Your mother and I were together for 20 years before she killed herself, because you made her feel worthless, because you cheated on her, because you put this company ahead of her at every turn." The words, never before spoken between them, hung in the air like shattered glass. "Is that what you think happened?" "I found her dad. I read her note." "You read 3 words. Did you ever wonder what she meant by that?" Victoria stared at him, uncertainty creeping in. "She meant that loving you had weakened her, made her vulnerable to your indifference." Richard shook his head slowly. "She meant that her love for you, her fear that my public humiliation would affect your future, your standing, your happiness, made her too weak to simply leave me as she should have done years earlier." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Ask yourself this, Victoria. If this maintenance man truly loves you for yourself, not your position, would he be willing to leave? To start over somewhere? Your name means nothing where you'd be just Victoria, not Whitfield." The question followed her through the rest of the day, through meetings and calls, through the drive to Queens that evening. When she arrived at Jack's apartment, she found him on the floor with Lily helping her prepare for a math test, using robot parts as counting aids. 7 + 8 = 15, Lily announced triumphantly, moving plastic gears into groups. "And if you have 15 gears and need to build 3 robots that each use 4 gears, do you have enough?" Lily's face scrunched in concentration. 3 × 4 is 12. 15 - 12 is 3. So, yes, with 3 extra gears. That's my brilliant girl. Jack looked up as Victoria entered, his smile warming. "Hey, you. Rough day. You look like you've been through the corporate wars." The domestic scene before her math homework dinner simmering on the stove, Lily's drawings magnetized to the refrigerator, felt like a sanctuary. After the confrontation with Richard, she dropped her designer bag on the counter and kicked off her heels. "Richard was waiting in my office when I got back from career day. He knows about us, about my visits here." Jack's expression tightened. "Are you okay? What did he say?" "The usual threats, disappointment, invocation of my mother's ghost. But I discovered something interesting. Legally, I control the company. Have for 3 years. Richard transferred majority voting rights to me after a major acquisition." Jack whistled low. "That's unexpected. What does it mean for us?" "It means he can't force me out for dating whoever I want. But it also means I have more responsibility than ever. The company really is mine to lead or to lose." She hadn't meant to introduce doubt, but it crept into her voice anyway. Jack heard it, of course. He always heard what she wasn't saying, a skill few people in her life had mastered. After Lily went to bed, they sat on the fire escape again the spring evening, warm enough to be comfortable. Victoria had changed into borrowed sweatpants and one of Jack's old army t-shirts, her CEO armor shed completely. "What else did Richard say?" Jack asked, handing her a glass of wine. "Something's bothering you beyond the usual Whitfield family dynamics." Victoria swirled the wine, gathering courage. "He suggested that if you truly loved me for myself, not my position, you'd be willing to leave New York. Start somewhere my name means nothing." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "And you're wondering if he's right?" "No. Maybe. I don't know." She set the wine down untouched. "I've never just been Victoria. I've always been Victoria Whitfield, Richard's daughter, the CEO, the heir to the kingdom. Even at Harvard, people knew who I was, what I represented. And you're wondering who you'd be without all that. I'm wondering if you'd still want me without all that." Jack took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Do you remember what I said when you offered to kiss me if I fixed your generator? That you didn't need my kiss? That you were doing it for Lily because it was the right thing?" "Exactly. I didn't want anything from you then. I don't want anything from you now. Not your name, not your money, not your position. I just want you. The you that helps Lily with robot designs. The you that falls asleep on my shoulder watching old movies. The you that still hasn't figured out how to load a dishwasher properly." Victoria laughed despite herself. "The dishwasher thing is not my fault. I never had to learn. My point is, I'd recognize that Victoria anywhere. In New York, in Boston, in some small town where no one's ever heard of Whitfield Energy. The question isn't whether I'd want you without all that. It's whether you'd still want yourself." The insight hit with unexpected force. Who was she without Whitfield Energy? Without the corner office and executive authority, without the legacy she'd spent her entire adult life protecting? I don't know. I've never had the chance to find out. Maybe it's time you did. Jack's expression was thoughtful. Not by running away or giving up your company, but by remembering that Victoria Whitfield, the person, is more than Victoria Whitfield, the CEO. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the question lingered in her mind. That night, lying beside Jack in his modest queen bed that somehow felt more comfortable than her luxury mattress, Victoria made a decision. She needed to resolve things with Richard, not just about Jack, but about their entire relationship, about her mother, about the company, about the truth that had festered between them for 18 years. She found her chance 3 days later when the quarterly board meeting agenda arrived. The final item added by Richard himself. Discussion of CEO, personal conduct, and potential conflicts of interest. The direct attack didn't surprise her. Richard had never been subtle when he felt threatened. What surprised her was her own reaction, not panic or anger, but a calm determination. This confrontation had been brewing for years. Perhaps it was time to let it happen. The morning of the board meeting, Victoria arrived early, meticulously prepared. She wore her most powerful suit hair pulled back and her customary severe style armor fully in place. But underneath she carried something new, the certainty that whatever happened in that boardroom, she had built a life outside it that had meaning. She was reviewing her notes when Jessica slipped into the chair beside her. "Richard has been meeting with board members individually for days. Whatever he's planning, it's calculated. It always is. But so am I." The board meeting progressed through standard items, financial reports, market projections, approvals for new initiatives. Richard remained unusually quiet, watching Victoria with the patience of a predator waiting for the perfect moment. When they reached the final agenda item, he cleared his throat. "Before we begin this sensitive discussion, I'd like to ask Victoria if she wishes to recuse herself due to the personal nature of the topic." Every eye turned to her. Victoria smiled, the expression genuine rather than the practiced corporate mask she usually wore. "Thank you for your concern, Dad. But as CEO and majority shareholder, I believe my presence is essential for any discussion regarding the company's future." The reminder of her voting control wasn't subtle. Richard's expression tightened momentarily before he continued. "Very well. It has come to my attention that our CEO has entered into a personal relationship with a Whitfield Energy employee, specifically a maintenance worker named Jack Morrison. This creates potential ethical concerns regarding favoritism, corporate resource allocation, and public perception. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Office relationships weren't unusual, but the power differential here was extreme. Richard pressed his advantage. Additionally, Miss Whitfield has been observed spending significant time with Mr. Morrison's minor child, including representing herself as a parental figure at school functions. This raises questions about judgment, inappropriate boundaries. The accusation making her relationship with Lily sound inappropriate rather than caring struck a nerve. Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. Are you suggesting that caring about an employee's child demonstrates poor judgment? I'm suggesting that the CEO of an $11 billion company should maintain appropriate professional distance rather than playing house with the maintenance staff. Jessica spoke up. I fail to see how Victoria's personal life impacts her ability to lead this company, which has shown record growth under her direction. Image matters, Richard replied. Perception matters. What happens when the press discovers this arrangement? How will our investors react? How will it affect our stock price? Victoria had let the discussion unfold, observing which board members seemed troubled, which seemed merely curious, which seemed supportive. Now she straightened, commanding the room without raising her voice. My personal life is precisely that personal. But since you've chosen to make it a board matter, let me address your concerns directly. Yes, I am in a relationship with Jack Morrison. No, he has not received any preferential treatment, promotion, or compensation as a result. Yes, I have a relationship with his daughter, who is a remarkable child anyone would be proud to know. She stood moving to the center of the boardroom. As for public perception, I'd like to remind everyone that I'm a 34-year-old unmarried woman who works 70-hour weeks building this company's future. My personal happiness has always been secondary to Whitfield Energy's success. But I've recently discovered that the two aren't mutually exclusive. Her gaze swept the room, landing finally on her father. Richard Whitfield taught me many valuable lessons about business. The most important was this: never confuse what you own with who you are. Whitfield Energy doesn't define me. It's something I build, nurture, and grow like any relationship that matters. She placed her hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. If anyone believes my personal life has negatively impacted my leadership, I invite them to review our quarterly results, investor confidence ratings, and market position, all of which have strengthened during the period in question. The boardroom remained silent as her words landed. Richard's expression was unreadable, but for the first time Victoria thought she saw something like respect in his eyes, grudging perhaps, but present. If there are no further questions about my ability to lead this company, she concluded, I suggest we move on to more productive discussions. One by one the board members nodded. Even Richard, after a long moment, gave a slight inclination of his head. The meeting adjourned shortly after, with Victoria maintaining perfect composure until she reached her office. Only then, door closed behind her, did she allow herself to release the breath she'd been holding. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Lily's science project won district finals. We're celebrating with ice cream after school. Join us. Victoria smiled, typing her reply. Wouldn't miss it. I have something to celebrate too. For the first time in her adult life, she left work early. The boardroom victory less important than watching Lily's face light up when she shared her science triumph. As Victoria drove toward Queens, she realized something profound. She was heading home, and it had nothing to do with buildings or addresses. Home was where Jack and Lily waited, where she was simply Victoria, where love wasn't weakness, but the greatest strength she'd ever known. 6 months later, the brownstone in Park Slope had evolved along with its inhabitants. The basement workshop had expanded to include a junior section where Lily, now 8, developed her own increasingly sophisticated inventions. The backyard boasted a greenhouse powered entirely by renewable energy systems of Lily's design. Victoria's home office had migrated to a converted sunroom that overlooked the garden, allowing her to run Whitfield Energy while remaining connected to family life. Jack had resigned from the company to head the technical development team for the Integrated Renewable Initiative as an independent contractor, reporting directly to the board rather than to Victoria. The solution, elegant in its simplicity, had addressed the conflict of interest while preserving both the relationship and the valuable partnership. The initiative was revolutionizing the industry, with Jack's technical leadership creating standardized systems now deployed in 15 countries. Richard Whitfield, semi-retired but still involved as a consultant, had developed an unexpected bond with his granddaughter by choice. Lily's technical brilliance combined with Richard's business acumen had resulted in 2 provisional patents already with more in development. Their weekly dinner discussions often devolved into heated debates about energy policy or market strategies, while Victoria and Jack exchanged amused glances across the table. One evening after such a dinner, after Richard had left and Lily was asleep, they sat on the back porch with glasses of wine watching fireflies illuminate the garden where children had celebrated hours before. That was unexpected. Richard Whitfield eating meatloaf at our kitchen table discussing robot designs with an 8-year-old. Victoria leaned against his shoulder. Life is full of surprises lately. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be living in Brooklyn with a maintenance worker and his daughter hosting birthday parties and making peace with my father, I'd have had them escorted from the building. And now I can't imagine any other life. She turned to face him. When you fixed that generator, you said you didn't need my kiss, that you were doing it because it was the right thing. Because broken things should be fixed. I remember. I think you've been fixing me too all this time. The broken parts I didn't even know were damaged. Jack touched her face gently. You weren't broken, Victoria. Just wired to the wrong circuit. You were running so much power through systems that were never designed to make you happy. Like trying to power a home with an industrial generator, she mused, smiling at the metaphor. Exactly. Technically functional but inefficient and ultimately unsustainable. He kissed her softly. Some things aren't meant to be fixed because they aren't broken. They just need to be reconnected to the right power source. The metaphor was perfect, technical enough to appeal to their shared appreciation for engineering principles, but profound in its simple truth. Victoria had spent years trying to fix herself to become the perfect CEO, the perfect daughter, someone who would never experience her mother's despair or vulnerability. She'd never considered that the solution wasn't fixing, but reconnecting to love, to family, to purpose beyond profit margins and market share. I have something for you, Jack said, reaching into his pocket. I've been carrying it around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. He opened his palm, revealing a small velvet box. Victoria's breath caught. Before you panic, this isn't a traditional proposal. I know we agreed to take things slowly to build our foundation before making permanent decisions. He opened the box, revealing not an engagement ring, but a key antique brass clearly chosen for its beauty rather than function. This is a key to the first power station I ever designed in Afghanistan. It provided electricity to a field hospital that saved hundreds of lives. I've kept it as a reminder that the work we do matters, that connecting people to power, literal or figurative, changes everything. He placed the key in her palm, closing her fingers around it. I don't need a marriage certificate to know that what we have is real and lasting. But I wanted to give you something that symbolizes what you've brought to my life, to Lily's life. Connection, power, light in places that had grown dark. Victoria stared at the key, emotion tightening her throat. The gesture was so perfectly Jack, thoughtful, meaningful, practical, yet deeply romantic in its own way. I love you. You and Lily. The life we're building. All of it. Jack laughed, pulling her close. Even the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. Even that, though I'd love you slightly more if you finally fixed it. I'll add it to tomorrow's list right after love Victoria Whitfield for the rest of my life. As they sat together in the gentle summer darkness, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a broken generator and a mocking challenge to this profound connection that had transformed them both. Her mother had been wrong. Love wasn't weakness. It was the power source that made everything else function as it should. I still owe you that kiss, you know. After all this time, I think the debt is forgiven. Nevertheless, she said, leaning in, I always pay my debts. And the kiss, freely given, joyfully received, sealed a promise that had begun in a moment of crisis and grown into a lifetime of connection. Not because it was part of a challenge or a bargain, but because broken things had been fixed, separate lives had been rewired together, and the power that flowed between them illuminated everything that mattered.